you out of your mind? Kaio's voice echoed through the crowded hallway. On your very first day, you're already stealing my wallet? What kind of person do you think you are? A heavy silence fell over the students, soon broken by muffled giggles. Every eye turned to the new student, standing right in the middle of Jefferson High School's main corridor. The metallic lockers around them reflected the scene like merciless mirrors. Root, clutching her worn-out backpack to her chest while her notebook slipped from her arms, couldn't believe what she was hearing. That's a lie. Her voice came out shaky, but strong enough to be heard. I never touched anything of yours. Kaio took 2 steps forward, imposing as if he owned the place. Tall, athletic, captain of the basketball team, he carried the confidence of someone who had always been treated as untouchable. A lie? He laughed, glancing at the students around him as if seeking their support. Then how do you explain that my wallet disappeared at the exact moment you walked past me? You're the only one who was here. Too much of a coincidence, don't you think? Some students nodded, others began whispering. Livia, one of Kaio's closest friends, raised her finger and pointed at Root's backpack. Her pocket is open. I saw her messing with it. She must be hiding something. That's not true. Root shot back, feeling her face burn. You're making this up. But the voices around her didn't stop. A wave of, open the backpack, spread through the hallway. The humiliation was crushing. It was then that Inspector Marta appeared, drawn by the commotion. What's going on here? She asked sternly, looking first at Kaio and then at Root. Kaio didn't waste time. With quick gestures and sharp words, he told his version of the story. He said his wallet had disappeared, that it had important money inside, and that the only suspect was the new student. He even described the sticker on it, as if to make sure everyone believed his outrage. That doesn't make sense, Root interrupted, turning to Marta, pleading to be heard. I just got here. I don't know anyone. I don't need anything that isn't mine. Marta sighed. Her firm gaze tried to control the group of students crowding around. Root, hand me the backpack. I'll check it. If there's nothing inside, the matter ends here. But this is humiliating, Root protested, tears stinging her eyes. They're accusing me for no reason. Please cooperate, Marta insisted, trying to keep order. With trembling hands, Root handed over her backpack. Marta opened the main zipper. She pulled out notebooks, a worn book, a small water bottle. Nothing suspicious. Root breathed a sigh of relief for a moment, but it didn't last. And the side pocket? Livia said, crossing her arms, a venomous smile on her face. No one's opened that yet. No, Root cried out almost in despair. I never put anything in there. But Marta, pressured by the stairs, unzipped the side pocket. And in front of everyone, she pulled out a brown wallet with a team sticker on it. The hallway erupted in voices. I knew it! Kaio raised his arms in triumph. The newbie thought she could fool everyone, but not here. Thief, someone shouted from the back. Shame, another added, sparking laughter. Root froze. Her breath was heavy, her heart pounding. This was set up, she finally cried out, looking at Marta. I never touched that wallet. They're trying to destroy me. Marta watched her with a grim expression. This is serious, Root. We need to go to the administration office. As the inspector led her away, Kaio smiled at his friends, receiving pats on the back as if he were a hero. But Root, through tears, lifted her eyes for a moment and saw the security camera fixed on the ceiling. Small, silent, but watchful. And it was on that detail that she clung. God knows I'm telling the truth, she whispered softly to herself, like a promise that this injustice would not last forever. In the coordination office, the air felt heavier than usual. The beige-painted walls were covered with motivational posters about respect, empathy, and unity. But the words sounded like cruel irony in the face of what had just happened. Sitting on a cold metal chair, Root kept her backpack on her lap, as if she still needed to defend it, even after the public inspection that had exposed her in front of everyone. Coordinator Sergio entered in a hurry, his expression weighed with concern. He had already been informed of the case and knew he was dealing with a serious problem. But like many adults in school environments, he carried the tendency to believe first in the version of the popular student, the exemplary athlete, the one who carried the school's pride in courts and tournaments. "I want to hear both sides," said Sergio, adjusting his glasses. "Caio, explain what happened." Caio didn't waste time. His speech came out polished, convincing, almost rehearsed. He spoke about the importance of the championship, about the effort of the whole team to raise money, and about how betrayed he felt when he realized his wallet had disappeared at the exact moment the new student walked past him. He gestured naturally, modulating his voice as someone who sought not only to convince but also to move. "I'm not here for myself," he concluded with a theatrical look. "I'm here for the team, for the school. If we can't trust our classmates, how can we move forward?" Sergio nodded slightly, impressed by the boy's apparent maturity. Then he turned to Ruth. "And you, Ruth? Do you have anything to say?" She took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears threatening to fall again. "I didn't steal anything," she said firmly, even if her voice trembled. "That wallet wasn't with me. It was placed in my backpack without me noticing. I know it seems impossible to prove now, but I wouldn't do that. I didn't come here to be called a thief on my first day." Sergio placed his hands on the table, thoughtful. Marta, the inspector, watched in silence, torn between the rigidity of her role and the discomfort of the evident injustice. It was then that Caio, confident he was safe, released a phrase that cut the wound even deeper. "Honestly, sir, I'm not surprised. We all know people like that usually act this way." The silence that followed was brutal. Ruth's eyes widened, unable to believe what she had just heard. The prejudice was no longer between the lines. Now it was explicit. "People like that?" she asked, outraged. "What exactly do you mean by that, Caio?" He shrugged, feigning innocence. "I'm just saying you're new, nobody knows you, and you're already involved in trouble. That's what it looks like." Marta pressed her lips together, uncomfortable, but said nothing. Sergio cleared his throat, avoiding her eyes. And it was in that complicit silence that Ruth's pain transformed into a mix of anger and determination. "I don't accept that label," she declared, looking directly at the coordinator. "I want the cameras to be checked. If you really want justice, then watch the footage. They will show what happened." Sergio hesitated. Checking the recordings was a bureaucratic process, dependent on approval from the administration, from the technician in charge, and rarely done for something as simple as a missing wallet. "We will evaluate that possibility," he answered in a neutral tone, as if wanting to close the matter. "In the meantime, Ruth will be suspended until we reach a decision." "Suspended?" she repeated, incredulous. "You're going to punish me without proof?" Caio, satisfied, displayed a discreet smile. He knew his performance was working. When the meeting ended, Ruth was escorted to a support room isolated from the rest of her classmates. The hallway was quieter now, but some students' stares still followed her with disdain. Every step was a wound, every whisper sounded like a judgment. As she walked, Ruth lifted her eyes once again to the ceiling and saw the camera fixed in the corner. A small, almost invisible point, but one that carried within it her only chance to prove her innocence. Inside the support room alone, she closed her eyes and remembered her mother's words that morning. "My daughter, never let others define who you are. God always reveals the truth, even when the world tries to hide it." Ruth took a deep breath, holding back her tears. She knew her battle was only beginning. The support room where Ruth had been left felt more like a prison disguised as a school space. The white walls, marked by old scratches, reflected the continuous hum of the ceiling fan that spun slowly above, spreading a tired, lukewarm breeze. On the table, there were some books forgotten by other students, and a pile of behavior reports, as if that place were meant only for those who didn't fit in. The clock on the wall ticked forward sluggishly, each minute dragging on like an eternity. Sitting alone, Ruth hugged her knees against her chest. Her lowered head betrayed the weight she carried not only from what had happened, but from the way she had been exposed in front of everyone. The scene in the hallway wouldn't leave her mind. The laughter, the accusing stares, the phones raised to capture her shame, and Kaio's voice full of conviction, as if his lie were the absolute truth. She thought of her mother, who at that very moment was working at a local hospital, completely unaware of what was happening. She thought about how painful it would be for her mother to get that call from school, to hear that her daughter, on her very first day, was already being accused of theft. Ruth's heart tightened even more at the thought of her mother's disappointed gaze, even if unjust, because a child's pain always becomes a mother's pain as well. From the hallway came distant, fragmented voices. Students gossiping about the incident, some laughing, others retelling different versions of the same story. Every phrase that slipped through the door weakened Ruth's strength. She was caught with the wallet in her backpack. I knew there was something off about her. First day, and already stealing. Imagine later. The words echoed like stones hurled against a fragile wall. Ruth squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the sound, but she couldn't. Every comment was a reminder that, for many, the verdict had already been delivered. The door suddenly opened. It was Marta, the inspector. Her face was still stern, but there was something in her eyes that revealed unease. She walked in slowly and placed a small bottle of water on the table. "Try to calm down," she said softly. "The coordinator will decide what to do, but until then you have to wait here." Ruth lifted her tear-filled eyes. "And in the meantime, everyone believes I'm a thief," she replied bitterly. "Nobody believes me." Marta sighed, looking away. She knew the situation was unfair, but she was bound by the school's rules, by the pressure of dealing with the most influential students, and by the weight of decisions that weren't entirely hers. "I can't decide right now, Ruth. But the cameras. Maybe they'll show what really happened." The girl took a deep breath. That was the only hope she could cling to. When Marta left, silence once again filled the room. Ruth closed her eyes and, in the midst of the pain, searched for strength in her faith. She remembered the words her mother always repeated. "God does not abandon the righteous. Injustice may last through the night, but the truth shines in the morning." It was in that moment of introspection that a sound near the door caught her attention. Someone was standing there. When the door opened, a classmate slipped in discreetly. It was Emma, one of the few who hadn't laughed in the hallway. With eyes full of compassion, she approached. "I saw what happened, Ruth. I was there. And I know you didn't take that wallet." Ruth looked up, surprised. "Then why didn't you say anything? Why did you stay quiet while everyone called me a thief?" Emma lowered her head, ashamed. "Because Kaio is too powerful here. Whoever goes against him ends up destroyed. But I saw the way he came up to you before everything happened. I don't have proof, but I'm certain he set it all up." Tears rolled down Ruth's face. It wasn't yet the justice she so desperately longed for, but it was a breath of humanity in the middle of the darkness. Emma held her hand and said firmly, "You're not alone. I'm going to help you." The promise hung in the air like a thread of hope within the painful silence that had enveloped Ruth since the moment of the accusation. The next morning, when Ruth walked through the gates of Jefferson High School, she was no longer just the new, unknown student. Now she was the girl from the wallet story, the name whispered in the hallways, the face stamped on cell phone screens and short videos circulating among student group chats. The humiliation that had begun as a spectacle in the hallway had turned into a collective trial, and no one seemed willing to wait for proof before choosing a verdict. The hallways, that on her first day had merely felt unfamiliar, now seemed hostile. Ruth walked with her head held high, trying to sustain her dignity, but she felt the weight of the stairs like stones. Some deliberately looked away, others stared openly, and some laughed without hiding it. The simple act of crossing the space between the metal lockers had become a battlefield. In the classroom, the atmosphere was no different. When she walked in, the whispers began immediately. Two girls laughed softly, covering their mouths with their hands, while a boy commented loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Better hide your wallets, guys." The laughter that followed cut through Ruth like a blade. The teacher, busy organizing his papers, pretended not to hear, And that complicit silence from an adult hurt even more than the classmates' mockery. When the break came, the school cafeteria became yet another stage. Ruth walked in with her tray in hand, but there was no place she could sit without feeling the discomfort of the stairs. She tried to choose a table in the corner, but soon heard the scraping of chairs as some students stood up, making it clear they didn't want to share space with her. Other tables went silent until she passed by, as if her presence were an invisible threat. It was then that Kaio, sitting in the center of the cafeteria with his friends, decided to heighten the cruelty. He raised his voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Careful, people. If anyone loses something today, we already know who to look for." The laughter that followed echoed through the room. Ruth took a deep breath, trying not to let the tears fall in front of everyone. She sat alone, picked up her fork with trembling hands but couldn't eat. The food had lost all taste, swallowed up by the bitterness of injustice. By the end of the afternoon, the punishment of isolation no longer came only from the students. Teachers and staff, even discreetly, had begun treating her with suspicion. Inspector Marta, though she had shown some discomfort the previous day, now avoided eye contact. Coordinator Sergio, pressured by parent complaints and the prestige of the basketball team, maintained the decision to suspend her from extracurricular activities until the case was resolved. Even the school secretary, when handing her some forms, did so with a cold look, as if dealing with someone who didn't deserve to be there. Ruth realized she wasn't just being accused of a mistake. She was being slowly pushed out, branded with a label that stole her right to exist in the school environment with dignity. And the silence of those few who knew something was wrong, teachers, classmates who suspected Kaio's setup, staff who had seen her innocence from a distance, became accomplices to the injustice. At the end of the day, already exhausted, Ruth once again walked down the main hallway. The echo of laughter still seemed trapped in the walls. But when she lifted her eyes, she once again saw the small camera, discreet, in the corner of the ceiling. That detail, ignored by everyone, was the thread of hope keeping her standing. They may not believe me now, she thought, eyes brimming with tears. But that camera saw everything. And God saw too. With a heavy heart, Ruth left the school that day more crushed than ever, but also more determined to resist. If everyone had turned against her, it would be the truth itself, silently recorded, that one day would defend her. That night at home, Ruth could hardly sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she relived the hallway scene, the laughter of her classmates, the raised cell phones, the wallet being pulled out of her backpack as if it were the definitive proof of a lie that wasn't hers. The words echoed endlessly in her mind. Thief. Shame. Guilty. Lying in her bed, she stared at the ceiling and felt tears slide silently down her face. The simple room, shared with her younger sister who slept peacefully, seemed to shrink around her. Ruth thought about giving up. She thought about telling her mother she wouldn't go back to that school, that enduring so much scorn was more than she could take. In the morning, when the alarm rang, she took her time getting up. Her mother had already left for work at the hospital, leaving on the kitchen table a handwritten note. "My daughter, be strong. God never abandons the righteous. I am praying for you." Ruth held the note between her fingers as if clinging to a rope on the verge of breaking. It was the only strength she had left to put on her uniform and return to Jefferson High School, even knowing the day would be no different. Upon arriving, the feeling of isolation was immediate. In the hallway, some students turned their faces away. Others laughed openly. In the classroom, the same comment cut through the air. "Hide your stuff, she's here." The teacher pretended not to hear. With every sideways glance, with every whisper, Ruth felt her resistance weakening. The urge to stand up and run grew inside her like a trapped scream. At lunch, she sat alone once again at the back of the cafeteria. There was no place to hide from the collective contempt. She tried to eat, but the lump in her throat wouldn't let her. Looking around, she thought, maybe it's better to give up. Maybe it's not worth fighting something this big. It was at that moment when hope was almost extinguished that a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Can I sit with you? Ruth lifted her eyes and found Emma, the classmate who had discreetly approached her the day before. The tray in her hands trembled slightly, as if the courage to sit there was itself a risky decision. Are you sure? Ruth asked, her voice breaking. If you sit here, everyone will start talking about you too. Emma took a deep breath and set her tray down on the table. I don't care. I know you didn't do it. I saw the way Kaio approached you before everything happened. I can't prove it, but I know he set you up. Ruth's tears finally spilled over. It wasn't justice yet, but it was an immense relief to realize she wasn't completely alone. Thank you, she whispered, almost voiceless. You have no idea how much this means to me. Emma placed her hand over Ruth's on the table, ignoring the curious stares and mocking giggles around them. You're not alone, Ruth. I'll stand by your side, and we'll find a way to prove the truth. Ruth's heart, so wounded by injustice, felt a spark of hope reignite. The darkness was still great, but in that instant, the presence of a friend was enough to remind her she was not lost. And while the cafeteria continued to mock, the camera in the corner of the ceiling remained there, recording everything, silent, patient, as if waiting for the exact moment to reveal what so many were trying to hide. The third day since the accusation seemed doomed to be just like the others. Hostile looks, venomous whispers, isolation, and mockery. Ruth already walked through the hallways with her head down, trying to shield herself from the world. But that morning, one detail changed the course of events. Coordinator Sergio had received a persistent phone call from Ruth's mother, demanding that the security camera footage be reviewed. She would no longer accept her daughter being treated as guilty without proof. Reluctantly, Sergio gathered Marta, the inspector, and called Kaio into the principal's office. The boy walked in smiling, as confident as ever, certain that nothing could shake his version of the story. The room was silent, filled only with the hum of the air conditioner. The technician in charge of the security system was already present, laptop open, ready to display the footage. Ruth was called in next. When she entered, she felt everyone's eyes on her, but this time there was something different. It wasn't just accusation, it was also expectation. She sat down, keeping her posture steady even as her heart raced. Emma, discreetly, waited outside, silently praying that the truth would come out. Sergio spoke in a solemn tone. Today we will put an end to this situation. The cameras from the main hallway were checked. We need to watch together what really happened. Kaio crossed his arms, smiling with irony. Perfect. Now everyone will see who's lying here. The technician clicked a few times, and on the screen appeared the black and white image of the hallway. The video showed students walking by, talking, some laughing. Everything looked normal until Ruth appeared, walking with her backpack on her shoulders, head down, clearly lost in the new environment. Her eyes locked on the screen. It felt strange to see herself like that, so vulnerable, but it was also silent proof that she had only been trying to find her place. Seconds later, Kaio appeared in the recording. He was chatting animatedly with two friends, but when he noticed Ruth approaching, his demeanor shifted. The silence in the room grew heavy. Then, suddenly in the video, Kaio leaned discreetly toward her backpack. The move was quick, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but the camera captured the exact moment his hand slid into the side pocket. The frozen frame revealed the truth. He had placed the wallet there himself. Marta covered her mouth in disbelief. Sergio straightened in his chair, his face weighed with shock. Ruth felt a shiver run through her entire body, as if the injustice of the past days had been ripped from her shoulders all at once. This can't be, Kaio stammered, jumping up from his chair. It's a setup. Someone tampered with this video. Kaio, Sergio raised his voice, firm. This footage comes from the school's official system. No one can tamper with it. What we're seeing here is the truth. Ruth, tears in her eyes, finally found her voice. I said all along I wasn't guilty. Nobody wanted to listen. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with shame. Marta, once hesitant, now looked at Ruth with a mix of regret and respect. Kaio tried to speak again, but his confidence had crumbled. I just wanted to teach her a lesson. I didn't think it would go this wrong." The broken, weak confession was the final nail in the coffin. Ruth lifted her eyes, still brimming with tears but steady. For the first time since it all began, she felt whole again. The truth had prevailed. The video had ended, but the impact still reverberated in the principal's office. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by Kaio's heavy breathing, as he could no longer sustain the role of the victim. The mask had fallen, and in front of the camera, in front of the truth, there were no arguments left. Sergio, the coordinator, rose firmly to his feet. His voice, once neutral and bureaucratic, now carried the weight of authority. "Caio Miller, not only did you lie to the entire school, but you also tried to destroy the reputation of an innocent classmate. This act cannot go unpunished. You are suspended immediately, and the board will decide whether your spot on the basketball team will be permanently revoked." The words fell on Caio like a hammer. The boy who once dominated the hallways with confidence and arrogance was now shrunken, shoulders slumped, unable to meet Ruth's eyes. Marta, the inspector, looked at the young girl with an expression of regret. She stepped closer, touched her shoulder, and said softly, "Forgive me, Ruth. I should have trusted you more." Ruth took a deep breath. The hurt was still heavy, but something greater had taken root inside her. The certainty that she was no longer a defenseless victim. She stood tall, wiped her tears, and replied, "He didn't just wrong me. He wronged everyone. Because if someone can invent a lie and everyone believes it without question, then anyone can be destroyed the same way." The words lingered in the air, heavy with truth. In the hallway, the news of the revelation was already spreading. Students gathered in groups, whispering curiously among themselves. When Ruth stepped out of the office, accompanied by Marta and Sergio, everyone fell silent. This silence, however, was not one of scorn, but of embarrassment. Each gaze that had once accused her now avoided meeting hers, as if everyone wished to hide from their collective shame. Emma ran to Ruth and hugged her tightly, not caring about the stares. "I knew the truth would come out," she said, her voice emotional. "God never abandons the righteous." Ruth returned the embrace, feeling that this was the true moment of victory, not just because her innocence had been proven, but because, despite all the cruelty, she had found a true friend. In the days that followed, the school had to face the consequences. Teachers apologized for not having acted sooner. Marta promised never again to make hasty decisions without proper investigation. The basketball team lost its captain, and Caio, once praised as a hero, was now remembered as an example that lies and arrogance are always unmasked in the end. But for Ruth, the greatest victory wasn't the punishment of the bully, but the restoration of her dignity. She now walked through the hallways with her head held high, not because everyone looked at her differently, but because she herself was certain of who she was. On the last day of that week, while crossing the main hallway, Ruth stopped for a moment in front of the security camera that had captured the truth. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and in her thoughts, she thanked God. "Thank you for not leaving me alone." And she moved forward, knowing that her story would not be remembered only as that of the girl unjustly accused, but as that of the young woman who resisted, believed, and proved that the truth always prevails. Have you ever lived through a situation where you were unjustly accused? Share your story in the comments, and remember, justice may take time, but it always comes. God never abandons the righteous, and in the end, good triumphs over evil.